also at the University of the Popo. Prof. Chauke was recognized as the Royal Society Newton Advanced Fellowship from 2015 to 2018. He's currently a NRF C2 related researcher. His interest is computational modeling of materials, especially in alloys, using density functional theory and molecular dynamics approaches. Hasani has supervised and co-supervised a large number of PhD, MSc, and honor students. And it currently has 4 honor students, 3 MSCs, and 4 PhD students. And about 20 of these students have, over time, have had awards at for different presentations at conferences on the local and international stage. And Prof. Chauke has over 50 research papers in journals and conference proceedings, and has presented over 200 conference papers locally and 20 internationally. This topic is advances in metal alloy development, a computational study. Please go ahead, Hasani. I look forward to hearing what you have to tell us again.
Thank you very much, Anton, for the introduction, and thank you to Dr. Mwegezi for the invitation and the entire team. And let me also acknowledge all who have managed to join us today. Yeah, I'll switch off my camera. I was just switching it on for, in case for those who haven't met me before. If you may allow me to proceed, without my face here. Okay. I'm going to share, as indicated on my first slide, I'm going to talk about the advances in metal alloy development, a computational study. And then I'm based here at the University of Limpopo, of course, and the research has been done mainly, at CHPC and the Materials Modeling Center. I'm trying to get my slide to move. Yes, just the outline of my presentation today. I'll give the background and some objectives of the project, which is registered under me as a PI, which is MATS 1047. Then I'll speak briefly on the research projects that we do, and give some introduction and background on the purpose of this presentation, and also outline the computational approaches. And importantly, I will also give some information on how we utilize the CHPC, and reflect on the output in terms of publications, and conclude. And also at the end, I'll just acknowledge everybody who is part of this work. I'm just having challenge to move the slides at the moment. The click does not work. Let me see. Okay, I'll use the, yeah, it's working. Thank you. Sorry about that. Well, the first thing, the slide is just to indicate what the project is all about. We're mainly looking using computational modeling, and then looking at minerals, metal, and alloys. Particularly, we look at alloy development, where we do predictions of new phases, new structures. And how we do that, we look at mainly phase stabilities of alloys with respect to its of formation, densities of states, elastic properties, overall mechanical properties. For non-dispersions in other sections, we also look at some X-ray diffraction patterns. And then we also do molecular dynamic studies, where we use semi-empirical approaches the LAMPS code, which depend on some force field. And then mainly our work from the beginning has been first principles calculations based on DFT and molecular dynamic studies. So most of the project we do has various applications, which I'm listing here. Some as shape memory alloys, some applications to steel and industrial for corrosion resistance, and also application to titanium metal production and titanium growth. So these are some of the things that we have been engaged on. But importantly, I think I need to indicate that there are various projects that have been undergoing over the years, and then I'm showing here the red at some projects that have been completed already. The blue ones are ongoing. These are all at PhDs and at masters. So you can see there's quite a lot of activities that has been happening or that is going on. Some of the people already are working elsewhere, but they have also benefited from the resources from CHPC. Now, the introduction of my presentation today, because I'm going to speak about metal alloy developments by way of using computational methods. So briefly, just to give a background on what are metal alloys. So metal alloy development refers to designing new alloys so that we can meet some specific properties or applications of our desires that can be used in various industries. And the alloys are actually distinguished by various compositions. As you design them, then you need to have a knowledge of what the compositions are of these elements. And importantly, they possess this unique microstructure that you can be able to identify them. And of course, they undergo different processes. So more importantly, when designing these alloys, one is looking at properties such as how strong, the strength of the materials, how good are they with respect to corrosion, and many more other properties. So one to note is that the metal alloys are actually functional intermetallics, and these are used in many industries. And for our purpose of our calculations, we focus mainly on automotive industry, aerospace, medical, and also in the catalytic environment. So to achieve this in our designing of alloys, we use multi-model computational approaches, which I'm going to show here as to how do we go about predicting new phases and then designing new alloys. So in this presentation, of course, I'll show how we have used these applications at CHPC to achieve our desired goals. So to begin here is just to show you the roadmap on alloy development, how we do it, things here. We start with the structure and determine its energy, determine the heat of formation, which actually gives us an idea on the stability of the system. And then that we also correlate with some electronic properties in the form of densities of states. So we use this relation just to see how the heat of formation and the density of states are comparable. And from there, we go and look at the elastic constants, then phonon dissipation spectra. And the X-ray diffraction here, in particular, we're looking at transformation from various phases. So with this 5 points or approaches, we are able then to come with a prediction of particular alloy to say this alloy is a possible alloy based on satisfying these conditions that are here in terms of how the heat of formation is, how it relates to the densities of states and all that. So I'm not going to dwell much on the scientific part because I know not everyone here has this knowledge, but so these are some of the things that one needs to take into account. I think for the elastic constant, I'm just putting some few conditions that for a particular material, when it's predicted or developed, it has to satisfy some conditions where we're able to say this is more stable when certain parameters of lattice process like C11 greater than C12, C44 greater than 0 are positive, and also the shear modulus is also positive. So there's quite a lot that one can look at, but I'm going to show a few slides on this just to show you how I'm referring to. So now to start while here, I thought I should use this slide, as a guide for this presentation on computational approaches. So in our designing of alloys, we use the first part will be the supercell approach. The supercell approach, you can use it to design whatever alloy you are of interest, and you can, of course, source, from VASP, phonon, code, as well as lamps. So you can be able to design your supercell there and all that. And then the other method will be to use the visual crystal approximation method, which is based at Material Studio, Castep, and then you can also use the reflex tools. This is for use for determining or calculating the X-ray diffraction patterns. And then the other one, when we upscale, is to use the cluster expansion methods, which allows us to predict quite a lot of structures. Particularly now we're using the code called Anchor, and which is linked to Monte Carlo, processes or code to finalize or to make some predictions, which I'll show also in this presentation. The other important approach that we use is to use the knowledge-led master code, which is the KLMC, and then we have linked this with FHI, AIM, SCALP, and TL Poly, because we're able to do some temperature calculations also here. And then the last one that is more recent in our group is the SWORD. The SWORD code also has a capability to look at solid and disorder of structure, and then it can create quite a lot of, or predict a lot of structures. So these are the 5 pillars of what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. Now, this is just an overview of how these are structured. So we have the atomic structure, DFT based in VASP, cluster expansion there, Ankel, and then linked to Monte Carlo. So this is quite a repetition of what I have said, but importantly is to note that with DFT, you can only do a calculation to a few hundreds of atoms, while with Ankel or Monte Carlo here, you can do quite a lot with about 10 to 9 atoms. So we're looking at thousands of atoms with this Monte Carlo. So it gives us an opportunity to actually, move closer to reality in our predictions. Now, this is just to show some of the resources, particularly when we're using VASP, which is based at the media platform. So it has quite a lot of programs that we can use, the VASP, and then phonon code, LAMS, Ankel, and then builders, and you can use all this analysis through this. So similarly, then you have also with Material Studio that there are quite a lot of capabilities there as well. So now just to bring you to speed with the approach that I'm trying to define here is when we're using DFT for phase stability. This is an example of platinum or titanium platinum systems, which actually formed the basis of our research in terms of alloy development. This started back in 2013, where Dr. Mutiba was involved in this project, and the work was published here. And then what we do, we use the relationship between the densities of states on the far top left corner there. And then we look at how the densities of states are comparable for different phases. In this case, I'm looking at 4 phases, B2, L10, B19, and B19 prime. So what one does is to check the behavior at the Fermi level and how the doors are actually shifting, around this. So now the most important thing is to know that the lowest states at the Fermi level correspond to the most stable system, while the highest is the least stable system. In this case, the B2 will be the island stable. So in this case, you can then now relate what you have found here with the heats of formation. So you can see the P19, which actually lying lower, and then it has the most energy in terms of heats of formation. So now this then has a direct agreement between the densities of states and also the heats of formation. So from there, and then you can move and see how the vibrational properties look like. For the B2, the system that is highly unstable, you can see it vibrates quite a lot, while the one that is stable, does not vibrate in the sense that does not have soft modes or imaginary soft modes. So that's what we use to actually define the stability of the system using this simple relation. So it is possible that you can find new phases when you probe into the negative or imaginary modes of the system. At each and every mode, you can come up with another new structure and then check what that structure means. In some cases, you might find that there might be a structure that can be stable, that can be found there, which was never predicted. Like in this case, the L10 structure was never shown in the first diagram. And then in this study, we were able to make that prediction and make suggestion into, for this structure to be incorporated into the phase diagrams. And this was a success story for these calculations. So this is basically how we look at stabilities and how we relate them with respect to heats of formation, density of states, phone anticipation curves, and also elastic constants. Now, so I'm moving straight to the first approach that I want to share with you, which is the Supercell approach. So the Supercell approach starts with a single unit cell, which then can be multiplied into 2 by 2 by 2 unit cell, and then you increase it as much as you want. So what I want you to note is that when you use the Supercell approach, for you to deal with smaller atomic compositions or concentrations, one will need quite a big supercell to do those doping, mixing the atoms together. But importantly, this need to be checked. All the configuration must be checked to satisfy yourself to say, this is the energy ranking is low or is high. So the supercell approach is one approach that we have used successfully to predict or some new alloy system. However, I should point out that the calculation could be very, very much expensive, especially when you use a large supercell, and that's where you need the high performance computing in the CHPC to assist you to can do this kind of calculations. And then the few things that we have done here is just to show you that we can still do the same relation where we look at the densities of states, we look at the heats of formations, and we also look at the mechanical properties and look at the strength of materials. As I've indicated that, when we are designing this, we also were interested mainly to see how ductile the material is, how brittle the material is. So with this approach, you are able to do different kind of compositions and then check whether these compositions are stable or are ductile or are brittle. So this is the success story that was done by Dr. Giale. This work was published somewhere in 2019. So I'm just showing the capabilities of using Supercell approach, but in this case, it was not a very big supercell, which was easy to handle. The other success story here also was done by Mr. Baloi here, who also used the same relation to do this calculation, relating his formations and also looking at the phonon. So here you can see that when you do the doping, as he has done here with the hafnium, you find that at smaller concentrations, you may have a lot of vibration, but as you increase the concentrations by looking at these phonon dissipation curves, you see that now the negative frequencies disappears at higher concentrations, and that relates to what you see also with the hits of formation that have been calculated. And then the next one that I want to show is one can also use the visual crystal approximation to design or predict new materials. What is the duty of the VCA here is that you work only on a very small 1 unit cell can then be used to make or create a number of alloy compositions from 0 to 100%. How we create that is by choosing which substitution you want to make. In this case, we were making doping with some elements on both the iron sublattice and aluminum sublattice. So you can choose to dope in one depending on which composition you want to reduce and which one you want to increase. And that also is guided by the application that you are actually targeting. Now, so some of the results here, you can see this work was done on iron aluminum by Mr. Conto here, and the work was published back in 2017. So also from the results of VCA, then you are able then to use the same principles of looking at the heats of formation, the densities of states, then you compare them and see how you can rank these systems. So here we're looking mainly at ternary systems, which are a bit high, but importantly is that with the VCA, you can run calculation at a very, very minimal time as compared to when you're using the supercell approach. So those are the differences between supercell approach and then the VCA approach. And then again, there was a work by Mr. Malivati also, which looked at zirconium niobium, this nuclear material for cladding nuclear purposes. Then this work also looked at how the systems bind to each other, and then how are they in terms of elasticity, and then so we were able to make such predictions to say the system is reasonable at what temperature. So, and which is very, very important. So we looked at how tin can influence zirconium niobium, or how cobalt can influence zirconium niobium for the purposes of nuclear cladding material. Now, the one other aspect that I want us to look at is looking at the molecular dynamic studies, which we use LAMPS code. And then this is a code that depends on the flowcharts. I'm not going to go through into how these flowcharts are designed, but one must be knowledgeable on what variables are needed. And this also gives you quite a number of supercells that you can look at and choose and be able to do further calculations in terms of what you want. So particularly here, I want to show that we can use or generate from LAMPS code, also be able to generate some XRD patterns just to check on how the systems are transforming from one phase to the other by just looking at how the peaks are changing. And also this now gives us an opportunity to learn at what temperatures can each or this particular system change from one phase to the other. And we have done that successfully, and we found that for certain phases of B19 to B2 phases occurs at high temperature, while the L10 is a bit at lower temperature. So these are capabilities that we are able to perform and using the facilities at the CHPC. Now, this is one complicated slide, but it also talks to the transformations that can be predicted by generating these X-ray diffractions. So importantly is that to do this, you need quite a number of calculations to do. You perform quite a number of calculations, and so that you're able to plot as many XRD patterns as possible, so that you do not miss your transform, because other systems will transform very quickly and you might miss that transformation temperature. So then you need a lot of resources to can achieve this kind of analysis. Then now, the next one is the cluster expansion, where we use the Ankel code. So the Ankel code allows us to actually generate a lot of new structures, and it is linked through the density functional theory, and then you can use VASP to do that. I think in our environment, that's the VASP, that's the one that is the CHPC that we are using. Now, there are quite a number of properties that we can calculate, and again, our focus, because of our aim, is to make or design or predict new systems. What we do then, we look at the energetics part of it, how stable the phases are. And then once we have generated so many clusters or systems, then we minimize them, we calculate the doors, mechanical properties, and any other property that is of interest. Now, the Ankel code also, because it's based on media, it also uses a flowchart, which makes it very easy for one to can do this calculation in a most parallel way. And the Ankel, as I've indicated, is linked to VASP. I'm not going to go into details on how this works, but importantly, at the end of the day, what we need is the total energy of each and every system that can then be used to perform Monte Carlo calculations. Now, what have we done is, with the Ankel code, one is able to predict many specific structures and rank them in terms of stability. So here I'm just showing there's a conversal which shows structures that are possible or that are stable, and some structures that are above the conversal or the ground state line are either metastable or unstable, depending on whether their isoformation value is positive or negative. If the isoformation value is positive, then those structures will be considered unstable, and those that are having negative then are metastable, but those are lying on the ground state line then are stable structures. So from this, then you are able to predict quite a lot of structures that you can explore. So, and depending on what kind of composition you are interested in. In this case here, we have predicted about 14 new structures for this system. And this work was also published. It was the work done by Ms. Lidwawa. So very, very interesting in the sense that you can do different doping sites. So you can do for cobalt site, you can do for iron site, and do all these predictions and come up with different compositions, check them whether they are reliable, check them whether they will be useful, and all that. So for like this study here is mainly for shape memory magnets, which can be used in many industries, especially the aerospace industry. Now, the next one is just to show the continuity from Ankel to then Monte Carlo. So with Monte Carlo, then we are able to check how the system are mixing as we mix them. So here I'm showing with titanium, palladium, and ruthenium. So we add that. So at the end or the top of this figure, where the line is almost constant or with the zero slope there, then that's where we find the good mixing of the systems. And once we achieve that, because now we'll know at what temperature that happens, then we can then construct a phase diagram. As you can see down there, we've done 2 phase diagram predictions and show the mixing region of the system and also show where the phase separation region occurs. And then this has been done for 2 different composition, where the first one on the left here was the substitution on the palladium, meaning we were reducing palladium by adding ruthenium, while on the other side we are reducing titanium by adding ruthenium. So you can see, and then you get different kind of compositions, which are very, very critical for the applications, because these are shape memory alloy that we're designing, titanium, palladium, ruthenium shape memory alloy, actually, and these are considered high temperature shape memory. And as you can see that the temperatures are very, very, very high. And this work, of course, also was published. It was done by Dr. Diallo, also published most recently, that is in 2021. So those are the success stories. And then we can then, we're able to then also use the KLMC, which is the knowledge-led master code, to do predictions in terms of developing metal alloys, but in this case we're using nanoclusters. So the KLMC is able to generate quite a number of nanoclusters that we can analyze and then calculate various properties. As you can see on the left here, we can check how the clusters are ranked in terms of energy, and also check how different are the configurations as the temperature is increased. So these are very telling applications that we are engaged on. And also you can tell, also we can do diffusion calculations where we can put or subject these clusters into any environment, or particularly can be in vacuum, and compare that maybe in some gases, depending on what application you want to achieve. So this work also has been done by Dr. Patla here, and it has been published in 2021. So this work is, you can see it shows quite a number of configurations, so we can be able to define how these clusters can evolve or grow and change from which configuration to the next. Now, the other one quickly is on metal surface modification that we do. I think this work was done by Dr. Tswani here, who is now at the CSIR. And then here it was mainly to look at how best can we modify the surface of titanium by etching mechanism with some acids. So he has managed to successfully determine that with HF this is possible, and then also we can use the densities of states to check how these systems behave. Then the other one, which I think is the last, which is the sort. So this is one which is very recent for us. And then we have used this. This is just a flow chart that shows where it starts. So we have done this for titanium, platinum, and with zirconium. So it is also one can link that to either VAS or CASTEP, to calculate the energies. But of particular importance here is that with the sort program, you are able to predict quite a lot of structures depending on what supercell you are using. Because it mainly uses supercell. Remember, I said this is it looks at some ordered systems and some disordered systems. Now, so these are some of the examples of the supercells that one can create, and these supercells, if you have 1 by 1 by 2, then for 4 atom supercell, then it can tell you what space groups are those, what symmetry are those. So as you increase the number of atoms, then you are able to predict different phases or different structures. And then what is important here is that now it gives you an opportunity to have a pool of structures that you can actually design depending on what is it that you are starting with. In this case, we looked at zirconium, platinum as binary, and then now when you increase and add titanium, what happens? All that. So you can predict quite a lot of structures in here. Like as I've indicated here, when you grow this, you can grow it to 16 atoms, 24, then 128 atoms, also 54. So then it actually gives you different kind of systems or space group. So I'm just showing the few structures on the right here to say you can move from a smaller supercell going to very high supercell. So of course now, working with supercells to do other calculations, you need the CHPC environment. Some of the properties again that you can look is to see how these systems are ranked in terms of energy and also in terms of isoformation, that is the stability, which system is more stable and all that. So you can see as you move very high into the system will actually reduces its stability. So you can do that. You can check the strength of the material in terms of bulk modulus, shear modulus, and Young's modulus. You can do that. And you can also do some configurational entropy to check how this clusters actually compares. So there's quite a lot that you can check here. But this is just to give you a brief of what it is possible with the sort program. And then now, just to indicate how the group has been using the CHPC environment. There are some various slides that are here, which I'm not going to go into detail about, just to show that we're using various codes to do our calculations. And then now what is important is to note that now for the 24 core, then when you do just an optimization calculation, that can take about 10 to 15 minutes, which is actually good, depending on how big your system is. For this one, it was the ternary system, which of course one will expect it to run a bit longer. 10 to 15 minutes is very reasonable. When we are doing other properties like elastic constants and all that, then you can take up to 30 minutes. But now for the phonon calculations, we can take about an hour, but that is the 48 core. What I should emphasize here is that with the phonon code, it depends on how big the supercell is that is generated from there. But if you were to use any other or normal computing, 1 hour, you might take more than 2 days or 3 days to achieve this calculation. So now what I want to indicate is that you can see here with the acid constants calculation, it takes less time. So this is another study that was done. You can see in this case, we can take 7 days depending on the system, because this is for permanent magnets. These are quite a difficult or heavier systems. So without the CHPC, it will be very difficult to actually achieve this, because you can imagine 7 days of calculation waiting to analyze just one calculation. So if it was just a normal system or using a normal computer, you can imagine this can take even longer than 7 days, maybe 2 weeks or so. Now, so there are quite a number of things that I can point out here, but here is to indicate that when we're using the environment of DL poly, then the size of atoms that we have is quite a lot. But interestingly, we're able to finish this calculation within reasonable time. You can see 1 hour, 15 minutes for this large number of atoms is not bad at all. Now, I can go on and on with this, but what I want to highlight is that the use of CHPC had a very much positive impact on our work in terms of running calculations, in terms of speeding up the calculations in most cases. Now, I just want to quickly come to here, try to conclude where I started, just to summarize how we do this with the supercell approach. It requires that we use the large supercell, which requires more resources. So you can see here for a small system, as I've indicated before, it will take us up to 10 to 15 minutes, while with the VCA, which is supposed to be much quicker. So depending on this should be about 1 hour, in the sense that now you have a complex system here of mixing. But then with the cluster expansion, because now it involves quite a lot of generation of structures, then it needs quite some time to run. Then it can take 1 to 2 hours. And these are very reasonable times, if you were to look at it, especially with the anchor code, where you are creating quite a lot of systems. Sometimes more than 50 new structures can be predicted. So, and the system must run quite a lot so that it is able to reach its equilibrium stage. And then also with the sort program, which is, you can see, it's very, very quick. Then with a supercell of 128 that I've shown, then you can be able to run that calculation within 5 minutes, which is very, very, very pleasing for us to do that, because now at the end of the day, you predict quite a lot of systems that you want or intended to. Okay, so, and this just to indicate that the program as registered at CHPC must 47, and then in terms of success rates, when we're running jobs, you can see that out of 188 jobs, 188 jobs are successfully completed. And then look at the CP hours used, then we are not, wasteful. Everything is, 15178 success is also 15178, which is very good. So in terms of allocation, you can see here this is how I allocated, and then unused is just not a lot. I think this could be because of the time that the systems may not be working. But overall, we are very much happy that we are able to utilize, and the success rate is very, very high. And then this just to indicate or share with you that how much we have been allocated. And then importantly is that we are really using the system, keep it busy. You can see here with the few users here, 1, 2, 3, 4 users. You can see how busy we keep the system, but this is just only for the recent statistics May. Then you can see that with the work of Andile here, she's really pulling the system And then also Dr. Giale, you can see that it's more concentrated. So this is very, very, very good for us in the sense that we are, able to utilize these systems. And then I know with Dr. Mashamaite here is lying around there, not much because of the systems that are very light, but those that Dr. Giale is using here on red, it's mainly of magnetic behavior, which actually are more demanding. So you can see in terms of course, when we're using 24 cores, we then remain down there, but now when we use 4 cores, you can see we're up there for the 8 cores. So this is very interesting to analyze, especially when you look at the success rates here, especially in the past week or so. You can see the success rate is very, very, very high. So, and then we are very much happy with this, and I hope CHPC can see that we are indeed making the use of these resources. So this is just a summary of how the 4 users have been using. You can see with the other day, in terms of jobs, 20 jobs, and then 20 jobs successful. Mutomoni, Lewuhang, 2 jobs successful. And then with Andile here, you see 156 jobs to 156 success. So this is a good thing. And then 10 of jobs, Dr. Mashamaite, successful. So overall, you can see the success rate is very, 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 very good with our calculations. And then because of that, we have been, for the past 5 years, able to, see to completion honors students, 8 of them, and then masters, 7 masters, and then 6 PhDs, and then overall papers in proceedings is 35 just for this group, only in the past 5 years. So this is very, very impressive, and we couldn't have achieved this if it was not the availability of the resources of the CHPC. Now, just to conclude on what I've talked about before, is to say the alloy development made it possible possible by the use of high-performance computing through the CHPC, and also that the multimodal approach that I've demonstrated here play a very important role for the validation and the reliability of the generated duplicate structures. And the various codes capabilities also depend on the size of the system. We have indicated that when you have a single cell, unit cell, then you run a calculation much faster than when you have a large supercell. Now, in terms of the group usage here of CHP resources, you can see it is very reasonable, and then it's much appreciated. And then the other thing is that the CHPC was very much instrumental to the increased throughput rate and output rate in our group. And then I think by that, I would love to acknowledge the following people who played a role in the work, especially the collaboration with UCL. Then we see Professor Mwepe, Professor Katlo, and then you see also the people who are now in the postdoctoral positions who have contributed a lot in Dr. Chamaite, Dr. Patla, Dr. Diani, and also some students here, Mr. Masuha, Mr. Paloi, Mr. Nkonto, Ms. Mazuku, now at the PhD. They are using the resources for their PhD projects, and also Mr. Malivati, Ms. Lidwaba, Ms. Nsomoni, and also Mr. Muyeti, who are at the master's level, who are also using the CHPC facilities. And also there are some honor students currently, about 4 of them who are also part of us who are using the CHPC for their work. And also the collaborators here with Dr. Tswane, CSR, Dr. Mudiva, CSR, and also the Dr. Shahidi also. And we also worked with Dr. Davi and Professor Chikwada as well. And I also really want to thank Dr. Anton Lopez for his support in the CHPC. We really appreciate and all the role players, the funders, and the collaborators through this. Can see UCL Society, Tech, Nexa, because most of the programs that we do here are also linked to our industrial partners. So with that, I would really want to thank you and thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hasani. Thanks so much. It's a very interesting talk. I think I have so many questions or comments, but so maybe I have to discuss it at a later time, some of them. I'll get to some of the questions so far from Boloy. Says, was asked, what does the broad density of states at the EF allude to? Can you hear me properly? Hasani, can you hear me?
Yes, please you can repeat the question.
Okay, sure. What does the broad density of states at the EF allude to? I'm not.
No problem. Yeah, I get the question.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It will depend, because this, what we're doing here, we are comparing, so it must be relative. So for instance, I have 3 compounds that I'm comparing here, and then now at EF, and then I'm looking at which states is lowest, and the one that is lowest, as I've indicated, is the most stable one or preferred one, while the one with the highest and then is the least preferred one. And then in terms of broadness, that will then depend on how your system is. If it's a metallic system, obviously I won't be that worried. There are some systems that we looked at, platinum, aluminum, nickel, aluminum. They are very much comparable, but not as broad as you can see. So what is key is how relative these systems are when you're comparing them. So I wouldn't want to jump the gun and say, because of the broadness of this, it implies 1, 2, 3, 4. So that will depend on what exactly you are looking at.
Okay, thank you, Hasani. Emmanuel asks, which of the models may be okay for studying the thermodynamics and kinetics of aluminum lead alloys?
Again, what are they?
Which of the models may be okay for studying the thermodynamics of kinetics and thermodynamics of aluminum lead alloys? Sorry about my voices to everyone.
Yeah, studying aluminum. Which systems are those? Aluminum what?
Aluminum lead alloys. ALPB.
Okay. I think if you're looking at the thermodynamic properties and kinetics, the LAMPS code is versatile, and then I'll really advise that one tries that. Well, yeah, that should be able to work, especially when thermodynamics as well as kinetics, because then you'll be limited if you're just using the standard DFT. You can only manage to do limited thermodynamic properties. But with LAMPS, then you can do quite a lot.
Okay, then a couple of questions from Sylvia Ledwaba. Is it always essential to perform Monte Carlo simulations after generating structures with cluster expansion? That was the first question. Did you hear it properly?
Yes, I got that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's always necessary to perform Monte Carlo for all the generated structures, but it is always necessary to perform and validate all the structures that have been generated. After which, then you can then look at the most preferred ones, which you can proceed and look and do Monte Carlo calculations. Because in that case, then you are then focusing on some determining what maybe you want to do some phase predictions and all that. So yeah, but for I wouldn't say it's a must, but if one has the time, can do that. But only I will advise that when you have generated all the structures using cluster expansions, it's always good to use different codes to do validations.
Okay, thank you, thanks. Thank you. And then Sylvia also asked, just exactly 2 questions. What is the essence of finding the mixing region on the phase diagrams? And with it, how does it align with the performance of the materials?
Okay, thank you very much.
This is from Sylvia.
Yeah. Well, when you are remember when you're looking at the phase diagram has different stages: gas phase, liquid phase, and solid phase. So it is important to know at what temperature does solidifying occurs, at what point where you have mixing occurring and all that. So in terms of the importance of that, I think one needs to be very much aware of what type of compositions and what kind of structure you are looking at, especially what compositions are those that you are interested in. So then it is very important to understand the structural feasibility in terms of at what phase will it occur. Hence, you have to understand where does it mix properly and where it's not mixing properly.
Okay, thanks, Hasani. I've got a couple of questions. You're running the various codes on on your local machines and on CHPC. How do you find the performance between the two? Do the codes scale in a similar way between the two sets of clusters, the two machines? And how important is memory to some of the codes? I think it's just a bit too general, but too broad a question maybe. But if you could comment, please.
Yeah. Obviously, with the local machines, the capacity is not at the level of the CHPC, and what we do mainly here is for preparation of calculations, especially those calculations that are urgent to prepare, and then we prepare them locally so that we are, once we are ready, then we can take them to CHPC. And obviously, all the calculations that needs more resources in terms of the runtime and any other, that we send them to CHPC. So the local servers are quite minimal in terms of capacity, but then there are calculations, especially those that are lighter, then we can always do them locally. So that's the difference why we need the CHPC. So if we do very large calculations or expensive calculations that do take time, then it is advisable to take that to the CHPC where the capacity is quite high.
Does the scaling work quite well with those? On both machines, you can see
Oh,
that when
yes.
you're increasing the number of cores, they both scale, but both systems will scale in the same way. I'm just trying to wonder whether in either cases you might be there might be a way to improve either one or the other.
Yes, I think it's a good question because one has to be very, very, very careful. Like in our case here, if your system has well converged, meaning if you have used the right parameters to converge the system, meaning that your system reaches equilibrium at a certain parameters. So even when you take it to CHPC and they use different cores and all that, it can only change the manner in terms of how long it will take to run and all that. But in terms of the output energy, then it shouldn't surprise you. It should be the same. So the scaling shouldn't be a problem. But now, if you were not converged properly and then you are moving from one code to the next, then you might run into trouble. So those are the very critical things that one needs to be aware of. Thanks.
Thanks, Hasani. Which version of Diapoly are you using? Is it one of the version 2s or version 4s? Or?
Yeah, I think we do alternate. There are some who also use version 3, some using version 4, because the capabilities there also differs. The version 3 can handle other system, version 4 can. Some cannot be handled, especially with the work of Andile. I know lithium and titanium chloride. There's a conflict there. So she moves between the two codes depending on what is it that she's covering.
Okay, yeah, it depends on the size of the system. I found with some of my own ones, you need to have probably at least like 12,000 atoms to be able to use all of the cores on one node with Diapoly 4.09 or version 4s. But you can actually also run it with less cores on a node. It can run quite a bit faster if you are looking at running slightly on bigger systems than Diapoly 2.20, which I've often used.
Okay.
It's worth looking at what size system you are and if you can actually maybe run it better in Diapoly 4. Sorry, I'm asking too many. If anyone else has a question, please put it up as well. And how are we doing on time? In the alloys, and are you sometimes in the liquid phase? Look, I saw some of the temperatures can be quite high. Yeah. So if you are, and also are you interested in some properties that are transport properties, such as viscosity, ionic conductivity, it's moved by movement, for diffusion coefficients, obviously, and thermal conductivity? Are they of interest in terms of the movement of the atoms, or
no? In the alloy that we have dealt with so far, yes, the temperatures are high, and those are still in the solid phases. Where they go beyond the normal temperature or the required temperature, and then obviously liquidify. But at that point, that is where we stop. We are not interested in that, right? And then now, in terms of other systems, yes, we do look at diffusion constants, especially when we're looking at issues of lithium diffusing in titanium chloride medium and all that. So we are interested in diffusion and how the mobility of lithium in the particular salt medium and all that. That will do. But the other properties we haven't done those. at the moment.
I was wondering how interesting they are. They're normally more like a liquid property, but you can also do them because there's from the dynamics, there's a very nice analysis code that I'm still looking into and trying to get it to actually work properly, but it's called Sportran and SPORTRAN, not yeah. And that can actually analyze things pretty well, and you can actually even be over a much shorter timescales than you think you normally would need, and you can actually get a lot of transport properties even from calculations that you could actually do from ab initio molecular dynamics, which would be a few hundred picoseconds worth of simulation, which is very short from what you would think you would need. But you can. That's. I was wondering if that would be of any use at some stage. I heard that someone put a hand up. Oh, Happy's got his hand up. I don't know if we can. Benjamin.
Yes, no, thank you, Anton, for giving me the opportunity. And thank you, Prof. Chauke, for a very informative talk. I think the work that you presented shows how important the availability of computational resources can advance the studies in material science. So it was really interesting to see the very interesting work that you are doing. And all what I can say is we are very happy to see the system being utilized for such important work, because these are the sort of things that help us to keep convincing our government to invest in high-performance computing. So we are grateful for this work, and I think from my side, I can just say we wish you all the best, and we will keep supporting you. And please let us know if ever there are any things that are required to improve on the already good work that we see. Thank you very much, Prof. And thanks, Anton, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much. Yeah, we will really raise a hand if we need extra resources. Yeah, and I think the support also from the team is overwhelming. We are very happy about that.
Okay.
You're welcome. We try our best. Within some alloys, are any of the metal atoms ever cations or ions? Is there any ionic behavior within the system, or
yes,
is there electron transfer from one cation to another? It's something that interests me in the kind of systems I look at, but I don't know whether that.
Yes, Anton. I think this one aspect that we also look at, but it doesn't help us in the alloy design. But in a way, what is important is to understand how electrons are moving, especially when we do doping. Depending on what element you are doping with, one must be mindful of its magnetic moments and all that. So in some of the work, we use the beta charge analysis to look into that, just to be able to describe or prescribe how electrons are moving from one to the other. And this is also useful when we do surface calculations as well. When you do the absorption, then it's important to know how the bonding looks like, and how what actually drives that. And obviously, that will be, of course, looking at the electron configurations.
Thank you so much, Hasani. I think we've basically run out of time now. It was a really good talk. I really found it very interesting. Hope everyone else also did. And thank you so much for presenting and being part of CHPC.
Well, thank you. Much appreciated, and I appreciate all the questions. And I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.
thank you for everyone for attending, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And thanks to all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye, Professor Chauke.
Okay, bye.